front, heroes. This is Stan Lee. Believe it or not, you asked for today's story. And many of you demanded that we tell you how it's possible that these students, who never seem to have much money, could possibly afford their incredible secret crime-fighting lab. Well, at good old Marvel, we listen to our fans. That's why right now on this very show, you're going to get the answer to all your questions.
You're listening to the Steeven Orr podcast, and this is episode number 12. Welcome to another episode of the Steeven Orr podcast, the only show online that's starting to look a bit squatchy. I'm your host, Steeven, and I wanted to take a moment before we get started here and give a shout out to our newest patron over on Patreon. It's Kevin. Kevin is a long-time listener. He's been listening since the beginning of Just Another Fanboy, and like listener John, was a big participant way back then. I think one of our, if not, I think our first voicemail back in the Just Another Fanboy days came from Kevin. Maybe, probably. I know, Kevin, that you've been around for a while. So I want to thank you for joining the Patreon. And like those before you, you now have immediate access to my other podcast called My Other Podcast, which only posts on Patreon. It posts twice a week, every Monday and Friday. So not only do you have this show to listen to, you can look forward to 2 extra short episodes each week. Now, speaking of this show, this week's show might be a little short. And by short, I mean as long as it's supposed to be. It should be around, 30 to 45 minutes. It's not going to be the hour and 20-minute epic that was episode 11. Because basically today I'm going to talk about Volume 1 of Sweet Tooth by Jeff Lemire. And I'm also going to try and speak about Daredevil Season 3, though it has been a number of weeks since I watched it, and I didn't take any notes while I was watching it. I mean, why would I? I'm not one of those people. So that should be fun, talking about a show that I haven't watched in a few weeks. That should be special, knowing the way my memory is. Now, along with that, you're going to get more music from kHill. We had his music featured on a previous episode, but he's got some really good stuff, so I wanted to feature some more. But before we get actually into the meat of the show, of course, I want to take a moment to talk about Stan Lee, who passed away on Monday. He was 95 years old. It's sad. It really is sad that the world lost Stan Lee. But you know what? Look at what the man did in his life. I mean, look at everything that he did, and he lived to 95 years old. That's something to wish for, frankly, to be that influential, to be that loved, and to last that long, good for him. Now, I do have to admit that when the news came out on Monday, I thought about not even doing the show at all this week. It just felt kind of weird. It always feels kind of weird when news comes out of somebody passing away, and then there are headlines, right? And then headline comes out, Stan Lee passes away. And then the next headline is, hey, look at this from blah, blah, blah. Yay. And it feels weird that the world just doesn't stop for, even 10 minutes to just mourn the passing of somebody like Stan Lee, like anybody. So the idea of doing an episode where I can get kind of silly and, just celebrating anything after that news, it felt weird. It didn't feel right. But then, once I really started to think about it, do you really think that Stan Lee wouldn't want people to be celebrating comics, most especially during the week that he passed away? I mean, that's what Stan Lee was all about, celebrating comic books. And to not do that just feels like it would be dishonoring the man's memory. Now, I've never met the man in real life, but I did have I'll call them two brushes with Stan Lee. But before I get into that, I got these two really small stories to say. Stan Lee, I'll just say he had a huge impact on my life. I have two favorite characters that top my list. Anytime somebody says, who are your top 10 favorite fictional characters? The two that top the list every time are Superman and Spider-Man. Stan Lee, along with Steve Ditko, created the character of Spider-Man. We wouldn't have Spider-Man without Stan Lee. And of course, Steve Ditko passed away earlier this year. So Spider-Man has just always been, like I said, one of the tops for me. The first time I ran across Spider-Man wasn't in comic book form. It was on the Electric Company. And I was really intrigued by the character because he never talked. He spoke in word balloons. Everybody else on the show talked in the little Spider-Man segments from what I can remember, and he spoke in word balloons. And then my first encounter, I guess you could say, with Stan Lee, the first time I ever knew who Stan Lee was this guy who was narrating Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Who's this guy? And he would always say, Excelsior! And what this guy sounds fun. He's got me pumped. And I played there at the beginning of the show one of his, man, I tell you what, I looked all over YouTube just for something from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, something with Stan Lee, because he would often introduce the shows and have little narrations in the middle of the shows. And I worked on it for quite a while last night and found that one, and it's a pretty good one. So I'm glad I found it. I actually had to, whoever put it out there, they had it on a video of like all of Stan Lee's cameos, and that scene that they put on there was actually sped up quite a bit, so his voice was a bit high pitched. So I had to play around with it a bit. I had to monkey with it to slow it. Okay, I didn't work that hard. I just slowed it down just a tad to make it sound like it's supposed to sound. So, yeah, I have these two little quick stories I want to tell about Stan Lee. Two times in my life that my life brushed near his. Like I said, I've never met the man, never spoken to him, but there were two times in my life that I came very close. The first one was about 20 years ago, and I was attending a comic book convention in Chicago. And for a very brief time, I shared a hallway with Stan Lee. I was walking one direction, he was coming the other direction. I really wanted to stop, say hi to the man, shake his hand, tell him how much of an impact he has had on my life. Because really at this point, I've been nerding out to his characters for over 4 decades. And like I said, for anybody to be able to create something that lives on in pop culture after you have passed away, you have put something out there in the world that will continue to live on, that people, generations and generations will continue to love. That's pretty, that's amazing. That's astounding. That's spectacular. That's invincible, to use all the descriptive words there from a lot of his comics. But he helped create an entire universe of characters that will continue to live on now that he's gone. And, that's just amazing. That is an amazing thing. So I'm in a hallway, Chicago, Illinois. Here comes Stan Lee. And like I said, I really wanted to stop and say hi, but he was surrounded by people. He had his handlers, probably people from the convention. He was also surrounded by, 5 or 6 people dressed up as Marvel superheroes. Cosplay wasn't a huge thing back then. Typically, if you saw somebody in a costume, they worked for the comic book publisher. And so you had like Spider-Man and Wolverine and Captain America, and I can't recall who else. Probably, I don't remember who else, what the other characters are there. So that was probably the closest I've ever come to my life brushing up against Stan Lee's life. But just recently, within the last year or two, the second encounter that I had, the second time that my life nearly intersected with Stan Lee, I wasn't actually even involved in any way. My brother-in-law shows up at the house one night, and he's got with him this Marvel sticker book. It's like something you'd get for a kid. It's got a bunch of stickers in the back, and you take the stickers and you put them on all the pages in the front. And he had been at the airport. I don't remember the exact circumstances behind why he was at the airport, but he was there. He was either just getting off a plane or he was picking somebody up. It may not have even been our airport. It may have been in some other city. Regardless, he was sitting in the airport, and sitting near him was Stan Lee. And, of course, he had people with him. He had his handlers and whatnot. And my brother-in-law wanted, of course, to go over and say hi. But he also, in that moment, thought about me, which I thought was really nice. He wanted to get Stan Lee to sign something for me because he knows that I'm a big comic nerd. And so he figured if he's going to meet Stan Lee and have Stan Lee sign something, he didn't want him to just sign anything like a napkin or a piece of paper. So he went over to the airport gift shop, and he finds this Marvel sticker book, and he buys it, and he goes back, and oh no, Stan has gone. Stan is no longer there. So my brother-in-law comes over to the house, and he gives me the sticker book, and he says, "Here, this is a memento of the time that I didn't get Stan Lee's autograph for you." And we still have that sticker book. So yeah, Stan Lee is obviously going to be missed. I've been watching some of the tributes. I've been listening to some of the podcasts, and the community, we're all taking it pretty hard. We saw it coming, and frankly, from the stuff that we've been reading, of course, we know that he was probably ready. And like I said, the man was 95 years old. I think once you've lived the kind of life that Stan Lee has lived, and you reach the age that Stan Lee lives, I think you're happy. You're happy to go. You look at what was going on with his characters right now. I mean, come on, Avengers: Infinity War is one of the biggest movies of all time. His characters are known the world over. 95 years old. Yeah, I think at that point I'd be like, all right, anytime you want to take me, I'm ready to go. My bags are packed. Let's get this done with, because I'm ready to move on to my next adventure.
Staring up at the ceiling, running the playback of my mind a million times. See the same things, review the same lines. It's cold. I just need to move around some words. Perspective will change and regain the ground I lost at first. Worst is yet to come, hear it in my head. Lately in the morning, I don't really want to get out of bed. Instead, I'd rather let it all fade away. Let my friends all leave, better if they don't stay okay. I guess you had a point when you said that I was probably wrong about feeling like I'm better off dead. Sorta starting to wish I'd slip off to sleep instead of walking around pretending like I still feel anything. It's getting really old wearing the same mask. I remember my sense of humor, so I still force myself to laugh. My last thoughts before I finally started other bad dreams. I'm starting to doubt I even really trust me. Is that you? Was that me? Lately it feels like it's a struggle for me to even bother to speak. It's been a long week, it's been a long week. It's been a long week, it's been a long. Is that you? Was that me? Lately it feels like it's a struggle for me to even bother to speak. It's been a long week, it's been a long week. It's been a long week, it's been a long. Life wasn't a blessing that they tried to tell me it was. I don't believe that.
Okay, so I picked up Sweet Tooth Volume 1 from the library. It's entitled Out of the Deep Woods. It collects issues 1 through 5. I've read these before, and I've read further along in the series before, but it was back when they were coming out, which was around 2009. So I didn't remember a lot about this series, and was really looking forward to reading it again. And it was written and drawn by Jeff. Why am I just suddenly blanking on the dude's name? Jeff Lemire. I think I said that earlier. Good Lord, having one of those days again, I swear. It's a perfect day for podcasting, frankly. It's very cold outside. Not, it's jacket, coat weather. But, of course, once you're in the close confines of a car and the sun is beating down on the windshield, it's still going to get pretty warm in the car. But as cool as it is outside, it's not getting too warm in the car. I might want to maybe close my shade a bit to keep some of that sun back. That's nice. But anyway, I was talking about Sweet Tooth by Jeff Lemire. So this is a book, like I said, written and drawn by Jeff Lemire. I don't recall who else worked on the book because the library stuck a big sticker inside the cover that covered up all the credits except for Jeff Lemire. And you know what? I forgot to look it up online before I came out here to the car. And while I have my phone here with me, I'm using it to record. So I'll throw that in the show notes. But this is set in a post-apocalyptic world in Nebraska. And I love me some post-apocalyptic adventure. There's just something about people trying to survive after the world has gone to crap. There's something about having these houses and cars and just stuff left over that people, they have to go into these houses and scrounge for food, or these, like a store or a building. There's just something about that I just find incredibly intriguing. I think if I lived in more of an urban environment and I had a more athletic build, I would probably be one of these people that explore abandoned buildings. I can't remember the names of them, but the guy who wrote the First Blood, the Rambo, the book First Blood that the movie was based out of, the Sylvester Stallone movie was based on, he wrote a book about these folks that explore abandoned buildings in large metropolitan areas. I think I would be one of those people because there's just something about that I find really intriguing. And so, of course, here's this book that comes along. It's post-apocalyptic. I'm going to give it a try, and I'm glad I did. It's about a young boy who's 9 years old. His name is Gus, and he lives with his father in a cabin out in the woods, deep in the woods. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be sniffing a lot because the weather has just made my sinuses, if they're not running, they're clogged. If they're not clogged, they're freaking dry. It's a cornucopia of nasal fun in eastern Kansas at the moment. But Gus lives with his father out in the cabin. Gus is not your normal 9-year-old boy. First of all, the biggest clue that you get about Gus not being normal are the antlers that are growing out of the top of his head. His ears are also very much shaped. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink. His ears are also very much shaped like the ears of a deer. And his father is sick. And so you kind of learn his mother has already passed away. He doesn't remember his mother. And you kind of learn within the first issue that there was basically some sort of plague that killed a lot of people. Gus, of course, is still alive. His father is still alive, but his father is sick. His father pretty much remains in bed as Gus goes out. It's winter and he's collecting firewood and stuff. But eventually within that first issue, his father does die. And when the spring comes, Gus takes him out and buries him next to his mother. Now, his father ultimately taught Gus two things: how to dress wounds and how to care, basically some basic medical knowledge, how to tend a garden, and religion. So, but he also taught Gus not to go beyond the woods. Beyond the woods is nothing but fire and death. So Gus has lived his entire 9 years there in this cabin, and now he finds himself alone. And as he's out there, he's burying his father, and he's standing there at the gravesite of both his mother and father. A deer walks into the clearing, and both Gus and the deer have a little moment, which is quickly interrupted by a pair of hunters, one of which uses a rifle to put a bullet in the deer's head. Gus quickly hides. The hunters rush into the clearing. They had seen Gus, and they refer to Gus as a hybrid and act as if Gus is not an unusual sight, that hybrid kids are something that folks in this post-apocalyptic world know something about. So it's not, while it was a shock for them to see him because there's something about these hybrid kids that apparently people want. You get the feeling that, they got to get Gus. They have to get him because he's a hybrid, but you don't know why at this point. So Gus is in hiding, and he probably would have remained hidden. But one of the hunters mentioned that he's found the boy's tracks, and so they're going to track him back to the cabin. So armed with just a slingshot, Gus decides to attack, to defend himself with offense. But of course, he's a 9-year-old boy armed with a slingshot, and these are two grown men with rifles. And he runs, trips, and they catch up to him. And they are about to take him up when another shot rings out, and one of the hunters is then shot in the head. Now, I probably should have mentioned this straight from the beginning, but this is not a book for children. And it's funny, if you look at the cover of the book, it's just Gus, like from the shoulders up, and he's got deer antlers, he's holding a chocolate bar, and he's got chocolate on his face. It almost looks like something a kid might want to read, but don't let your children read this unless you don't have a problem with your children reading a lot of curse words and seeing a lot of violence. Because that's what this book has got a lot of, cursing and violence. So one of the hunters gets shot, and another man joins the clearing. Now, Gus had been having a dream about a man, an older gentleman with bad eyes. And what he means by that is the man is staring at him with these very angry, hostile eyes. And this is the man from his dream. So you get a sense at this point that, not only is Gus this hybrid between an animal and a person, he dreamt of someone he's never met before, and now that person is there in the clearing with him. So does Gus have the ability to see into the future using his dreams? Does he have the power of prophecy? We don't know. They don't answer that at all in this first trade. And frankly, I don't remember it coming up a lot from what I read beyond the first trade, but they definitely don't answer it in the first trade. But, maybe based on the fact that he did dream about this guy, and now the guy's there. Well, so the guy takes out both of the hunters, and Gus is still hiding, and the man with the bad eyes says, basically tells him it's okay to come out. But Gus at this point is run. He's run away, and the guy tracks him back to his cabin, finds him hiding under the bed, and he tells him, it's like, I'm not here to hurt you. You're safe. I'm actually here to take you to the preserve. And Gus says, Gus doesn't want to go with him. His dad has told him never to leave the woods, because beyond the trees, again, is hell and fire and death. But when the man who tells him that his name is Jeopard, which he says is like leopard, he starts talking to him about the preserve, and he tells Gus that it's a place for hybrid children to go where they can be safe. And this really appeals to Gus, so Gus goes with him. And so the rest of the book, this is issue 1. They set off, and then the rest of the book is basically a road book. It's Gus and Jeopard on the road, and some of the stuff that they encounter along the way to the sanctuary. At one point, their first night out on the road, Jeopard is heating up he's grilling some kind of meat over the fire, which Gus will not eat because he says he's never eaten the meat of any living thing before. that his father had always grown vegetables, and that's what they lived on. Jeopard gives him a candy bar, which Gus gobbles down, and that is where he gets the nickname Sweet Tooth. From that point on, Jeopard refers to him as Sweet Tooth for the rest of the book. That first night, they are set upon by three men in what look like tribal masks to resemble animals. One is like a cat. One looks like maybe a horse. Then the other one is an elephant. And they're there for Gus. Jeopard, of course, takes two of them out using just his hands because he's a very good fighter. He is also very brutal. He believes, he seems to have the belief, he's one of these fighters, that there's no honor. You do what you need to do to take the guy out. Whether that's kicking them between the legs, gouging their eyes out, ripping their throat out with their bare hands. This is the way Jeopard fights, and so he takes two of them down. Now, as he's fighting them, however, these three men are armed with baseball bats with spikes coming out of them, and he does take a hit to the ribs at one point. And the man in the elephant mask snatches up Gus and runs off into the night. Jeopard grabs up his rifle and is able to take the man in the elephant mask down and get Gus back, only to pass out himself from blood loss. From blood lost? Lost. Blood lost. From blood loss. Gus at that point takes over, and he gets Jeopard up on his horse, and Gus leads the horse away, and eventually he finds a house with a barn, and he takes Jeopard into the barn, and he goes and he searches through the house, and he finds food. And I don't know if at one point, as Jeopard is unconscious, he cleans and patches up his wound. So I don't know if Jeopard had the medical supplies on him or if Gus found him in the house. But regardless, he fixes old Jeopard up, and Jeopard wakes at one point. Well, actually, before that, so because this is slightly important, Gus is going through the house and he's scrounging up food, and he goes into a bedroom where there is the body of a little boy laying in bed who has obviously been dead for a number of years. And a little boy, he's got a Batman poster on his wall behind him, and he's clutching a book called Dandy. And so Gus takes the book. And so that night they eat, he patches Jeopard up, and he falls asleep holding onto this book. And it looks like one of those old golden books. I don't know if y'all are old enough to remember the golden books from back when I was a kid. They were kids' books, and they were called golden books because they had a golden spine. And the cover shows a kind of a cartoony deer. So it's like Bambi, but it's called Dandy. And so that night he has a dream, and this character Dandy with a rabbit visits him in his dream and tells him that Jeopard is not a good man, that he needs that Gus should not trust Jeopard and he should run. And then you hear the sound of barking, and Dandy is like, "It's not too late, run. You have to go now. You have to run." And Dandy runs away, and a hunter shows up, but not like an Elmer Fudd type of hunter, more like an old dandy, like the old fox hunts that rich people would go on. And he's got all these hounds with him, but the hounds are like half men, half dog. And Gus wakes up from his nightmare, and Jeopard is now awake at this point. So if the theory at this point, because Gus had been dreaming of Jeopard and then Jeopard is there to save him, does that mean Gus has the power of prophecy? And if so, does this dream mean that he should run away? Well, he doesn't. He stays with Jeopard, and we'll find out later whether or not he should have run. So they move on the next day, and they're going through a town. The next encounter they have with people, they're still in Nebraska, and they're going through a town, and they come across, I can't tell by the art whether it's like a football field or it's like the town square, but it's just filled with corpses. And Jeopard apologizes. He kind of forgot which way that they were going. He had meant to avoid that. And they realize that, I believe at one point maybe they were going to go scrounge for food. But I know at one point they're in the middle of town, and Gus can see somebody, the shadow, the figure of somebody up in a window in like the second story of this building. So Jeopard goes to investigate, tells Gus to stay behind, but of course Gus won't. And they go to investigate, and they find in this room a girl. We don't know the age. She could be a teenager. She could be in her 20s. They don't really say. But she's on this bed. She's kneeling on this bed, and she's got rabbit ears. And Jeopard confronts her, and he pulls the rabbit ears off of her head. So we find out that they're fake. And she appears to be some type of prostitute. She's a prostitute who is who's disguised as one of these hybrid kids, because apparently they are catering to, I guess, men who like hybrid kids. But as Jeopard is trying to figure out what's going on, somebody comes up behind him and puts a gun to the back of his head. It would be the man who runs this house of ill repute, and his wife, and they have maybe 3 to 4 other girls with them. And you can tell just based on the exchange in this point in the story that this husband and wife do not treat the girls very well. Jeopard manages to talk the man down. The man's going to kill him, but Jeopard, using just the cold steel in his eyes, basically convinces the man that he's not going to kill him. And Jeopard, if anything, will kill the man for daring to point a gun at him. So the guy ends up lowering the gun. He's like, all right, fine, you guys just... You all get out of here. Just leave us alone. And so they leave. And I believe at one point they can hear the man yelling at one of these girls. And they might even hear a smack. And Gus guilts Jeopard into going back up to save these girls. And so he does. And he kills both the man and the woman. And he tells these girls that they're free to go. Actually, he kills the man. One of the girls takes the man's gun and kills the man's wife. Jeopard tells them that they're free to go, and they're like, where are we going to go? There's no place we can go. I think they either ask if they can go with him, or they're kind of hinting that they want to go with him, but regardless, they don't go with him. He and Gus leave them there. And eventually by the end of the trade, and this is going to be a big spoiler if you haven't read it, eventually by the end of the trade, by the end of the 5th issue, they arrive at the sanctuary, but the sanctuary is not what it seems. You hear the word sanctuary. Is that what they call it? Now I can't even recall if that's what they called it. The preserve. Yeah. When you hear the word preserve, you're thinking of an animal preserve. So you're thinking of trees and hills and, just a lot of land for animals to run upon. But this is some type of compound surrounded by a fence. And they have to fight their way through a bunch of men blocking the path with a school bus. At one point, they finally make it to the preserve. It's not what Gus thinks it is. And come to find out, Jeopard is selling Gus to the man that runs this compound, this preserve, who may or may not be some sort of doctor and may or may not be planning on doing some experiments on Gus. Because you find out during the book, at one point, Jeopard asks Gus how long he had been at the cabin, and Gus said that his dad had just told him before he died that they were celebrating his 9th birthday or something. And Jeopard said, well, that can't be right, because the plague began 7 years ago, and you hybrid kids are what came out of the plague. So there are hybrid kids who are hybrids of animals and people who were born from the plague. And you get the feeling that they are immune to whatever disease has been killing everybody off. And that's why people want them. But Gus, on the other hand, claims to have been born before the plague. And yet he is a hybrid. So what's the deal with that, right? And he appears to have the power of prophecy. He can see into the future. He dreamed of Jeopard. Jeopard was real. He had a dream that told him that he should not trust Jeopard and that he should run. He decided to trust Jeopard, and Jeopard sells him to this doctor of some sorts in this compound. And we don't know what he has sold Gus for. He's just been given a big duffel bag. I mean, it can't be money. I mean, money is usually not a thing anymore in a post-apocalyptic world, but you don't know what it is, what his price was. But he turns his back on Gus and he walks away, and that's how the book ends. It was very enjoyable. And like I said, I remember I have read further than that book, back in 2009, 2010. And so I have been having these, I don't remember much about the first 5 issues. I don't remember much about anything after the first 5 issues, but I keep having these flashes, these pictures of memory from reading some of those books, and it's got me excited to read more of the series. And so next month when I go to the library again with the girls, hopefully they'll have book 2 there for me to check out. The art in it is very Jeff Lemire's art. It's not a classical comic book art style, and that for this story that actually works to the story's advantage. It's very dark. It sets, not dark, but it really sets the tone. The art style sets the tone for what kind of book you're going to be reading. I couldn't imagine. I've also been reading at the same time. I've been reading some old books by John Byrne, and I can't imagine somebody like a John Byrne doing a story like this, because his art wouldn't fit a story like this. Jeff Lemire's art, however, totally fits the story. It's very stylized. It's very indie. It feels like an indie book, and it is published by DC Vertigo, but it feels like the type of book that, regardless if he had done it through DC or not, he would have self-published it himself. That's how the book feels, and that's how the book looks. But it's not to the book's detriment. It's a very good story. It is a very quick read. I think if I was to say anything negative about the book, is that it is a very fast read. I read through that entire trade it took me about as long to read, because I'm also reading some old books. You'll find out about why I'm reading older books next week. But I'm also reading these older books. And in the amount of time it takes me to read one issue of an old book from the 80s, it took me to read all 5 issues of this trade. There are, of course, fewer panels nowadays. A lot of pages are 6 to 4 panels. Very rarely do you get a 9-panel grid or more than 6 panels. But you know what? That's fine. It as long as the book is good, I could care less. And this was a really good book. So as long as you can get past the cursing and the violence, if you're not somebody who likes a book with a lot of cuss words or bloody violence, this is not the book for you. If that stuff doesn't bother you at all, and you like tales about the post-apocalyptic adventure, this is the book for you, because it's, like I said, it's a really good read, and I'm really looking forward to getting book 2 as soon as possible.
A life lived redacted, a silence immeasurable, winning an illusion, hungry somehow more pleasurable, full stomach to make more food for crows. The ending was coming, it just got here so slow, wrote faster. It spun us round a couple times with a flashback to a past we never really left behind. It's just a matter of time, but really isn't everything. All that matters is time, and it never stops ticking. Picking a place to get married, and you're picking the first name, picking a home for you to die, and picking the last move in the game. Someone's picking the last outfit, picking flowers for the day, singing the last goodbye, a last time to walk away. Then it's just a matter of time your voice starts to fade. They quit remembering your face, forget the things you used to say. Reduce just to a symbol, little more than aesthetic. Learn to live with it, cause you never get to regret it.
So I recently watched season 3 of Daredevil on Netflix, and by recently I mean maybe within the last 2 weeks. But I was able to watch all of the episodes within maybe a 4-day period. I was able to do a lot of binging on the show. I know that I think that one of the days after I had started watching it, I was off of work, and it was during the week. So the kids were at school, and I was able to just spend the day watching the show, and it was really good. Daredevil continues to be the best of all of the Marvel Netflix shows, and it's again, like, if you haven't watched him, and if you're not aware, it's not a show for children. And I do have conflicting feelings about that. It's kind of like Deadpool. The place I work at night, or in the evenings and the weekends, my second job, will sometimes have in the toy department like plushy Daredevil toy, or not Daredevil, Deadpool toys. And we got them right after the first movie came out, and then we got them again after the second movie came out. And my thought is, this is not a movie for children. Why are they making plushies for children based on a character who is in a rated R movie? And that's where I get conflicted when it comes to comic books. Daredevil, and then Batman is also a good example. You've got Batman, who basically, a lot of these characters, you have different versions of the character. They create versions for kids, and they create versions for adults. And that can be, for a kid, it can be kind of confusing. It's like, oh, I've seen Batman cartoons, and Batman's really fun. We like Batman, and here's a Batman comic book. Ooh, let me open it up and look, and there's a bat penis. Granted, if you're a good parent, you're going to keep that stuff away from your child. But still, I'm a little conflicted over that kind of stuff, because Daredevil, while Daredevil there's not a Daredevil cartoon, he has been in Spider-Man cartoons in the past. But this is not a show for children. I think it's rated TV mature. But let's just get beyond that, because it was super freaking good. And this saw the return of the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk. He is in prison. And we also find out how Daredevil survived the building falling on top of him in the end of Defenders. And spoilers, Matt Murdock never at any point during the entire third season puts on the Daredevil costume. He spends the entire time dressed as he did for most of the first season, in black, with the black bandana tied around his face. Now there's reason for that. I'm not going to get really deep into the season. I just want to talk about some of my favorite, some of the things I really liked about it. Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, I really liked. Vincent D'Onofrio, casting him as Kingpin. Whoever's job that was, whoever made that decision, they can live the rest of their life knowing that they have done probably one of the greatest jobs of casting ever known in all of Hollywood, all of TV. Vincent D'Onofrio is perfect as Wilson Fisk. He's great. There are moments where you feel like he is just an uncomfortable little kid, and you start to maybe feel a little sorry for him. And then the next thing you know, he's wrapping a man's jacket around his head and beating him to death with his fist. And he is just a brutal, brutal person. And he's ruthless. And the whole story is that he finds out that the woman that he loves, who's, God, I just had her name right on the tip of my tongue, and now I can't remember it. I can picture her. She's in Europe, and she's in hiding because the authorities consider her a accomplice to Wilson Fisk's crimes, and they want to extradite her back to America and put her in prison. And of course, Kingpin doesn't want that to happen because he loves her. And so he ends up cutting a deal with the FBI. He decides to turn snitch. If they will, he's like, I'm happy to remain in prison, but drop all charges against her and let her come back to the country. And I will drop the dime on all these big time drug rings and whatnot, human trafficking, and just, really shut down a lot of crime in New York City. And of course the feds agree. But then not long after he turns in the first criminal, he is stabbed in the weight room by another prisoner. He doesn't die, of course, and he uses that. His lawyers use that as, Wilson Fisk is not safe in prison. It's the word's out. He's a snitch, and if he remains in prison, he's going to be killed. And if he's killed, then he's not going to be able to give up any more names. And so they strike this deal that would never happen, where he is put on house arrest in this penthouse of this lush hotel, and he's gotten all of his stuff back. And on the detail, one of the FBI agents on the detail watching him is a guy named Poindexter. Everybody calls him Dex. And this is who will become Bullseye. And all the stuff about Dex, man, and how he, his childhood, and how Kingpin manipulates him and turns him into what will eventually become Bullseye. He doesn't become technically Bullseye at all in the season. What he does is Kingpin has Melvin, the guy who is the Gladiator in the comic books. He's the guy that made Matt Murdock's Daredevil suit. He has him make another Daredevil suit for Dex, and he's using it to discredit Daredevil. And he has a press conference and blames Daredevil for his imprisonment, said that he was innocent and he was framed. And in the meantime, Dex, dressed up as Daredevil, is out murdering people. The guy that stabbed Kingpin, they find him because he was supposed to be in solitary, but they find out that he was actually released from prison. That Kingpin set it all up. He was never meant to die. He used it as a ploy to get out of prison and take control of his criminal empire again. And he takes control of certain key people within the FBI and the federal government and the police. And, he does what the Kingpin does. But Karen Page tracks this guy down. They're going to have a press conference. And then so Dex, dressed up as Daredevil, breaks it, comes to the building where the newspaper is, where they're going to have the press conference. And he kills everybody there except for Foggy Nelson, Karen Page. I don't think he kills everybody in the building, but he kills a lot of people. But he's there to kill that one guy. And, of course, he does it as Daredevil. And after he kills all these people, he, on video, because there's security footage, he walks up to Karen Page and he goes, "Hey, Karen, good to see you again." And everybody knows that at this point that Karen Page and Daredevil are friends. And so they all think it's actually Daredevil. And it's such a good story. Foggy Nelson is excellent in this season. He has quickly become one of, if not my favorite of the Marvel characters on all of these shows. But man, it was just a really good show. So when Dex, dressed up as Daredevil, creeps into the newspaper offices, Matt Murdock is there in his black suit with the bandana tied around his head. And they start fighting. And I actually started, I know Daredevil's not going to die, but you feel they did a really good job of making you feel fear for Matt Murdock. I mean, this Dex is just so good at what he does, and everything he throws hits whatever he's throwing at, something at it hits it. Whether he has to bounce it off of a couple walls, he knows all the angles, the trajectories. He's going to throw something at a tree to hit somebody next to the tree. He knows how to do it. And you actually fear for Matt Murdock during this point. He's just that good. And Matt Murdock himself is super freaking good. And for Bullseye to be that good, they did a really good job of creating a foe for Daredevil that you feel could easily beat Daredevil, that Daredevil has to work hard to overcome. But man, it was a good season, and it ended taking everything back to the status quo. So by the time when this third season starts, Nelson and Murdock is done. Foggy has gone to work for this big name law firm. But by the end, and Karen Page is working for the newspaper. But by the end of the third season, they have decided to bring Nelson and Murdock back, but to invite Karen Page into the fold, and they toy around with the name Nelson, Murdock, and Page. But it doesn't. There is a scene right at the very end with Dex in surgery because his back had been broken, and they're using some kind of experimental surgery to repair his back. And so you do feel with that scene that Bullseye will be back. But otherwise, the way everything else ended, it's like, maybe the show is over with the cancellation of Iron Fist, with the cancellation of Luke Cage. Maybe the show is over and we're not going to get any more Daredevil. I don't know what's going on there. You know, some rumors are flying around that Disney is just buying back all the properties from Netflix so they can put it on their new streaming service. But there are other people that say that Disney's not going to put shows like that on their streaming service because they're too mature. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I would like to think that they canceled Iron Fist and Luke Cage because they're going to do a Heroes for Hire or a Power Man and Iron Fist season. That's the hope. I think it's more of a pie in the sky type of hope. But, you know, that's the hope. But that was Daredevil Season 3. I really enjoyed it. And I know that Punisher's coming up pretty soon. And Punisher Season 1 was amazing, so I'm looking forward to Punisher Season 2. And that was my talk about TV.
Challenge your audience to change the game a couple times. Flip the script or otherwise it is wasting the rhymes. I mean it's true, I got the level maxed out. Running around, flipping out and all the internet fools now. And maybe you wanna step up with some magic cards. Or maybe you wanna join me next week holding placards. Or maybe you think that you can see me in some Mario 3. Or maybe you wanna join me for book club feminist readings. My politics a little past left. Think I'm the only anarcho-socialist and nerdcore, yes. But anyway, call me out whoever you can, man. Between the rounds of Mortal Kombat, I read it in my Goldman. But not trying to be labeled an extremist. Ask Jesse dangerously, I'm the once a future meanest. Evolution is growth, seeking intelligence and sees it. And you're left with a mind if I'm a -3. Challenge your audience.
That's the job, no way to give it up or pass it on. To last at all.
Challenge your audience.
Hit these tunes so you don't suffer obscurity and fade real soon. Straight true.
Challenge your audience.
Prime directive if you're trying to connect with peeps and find perspective in the scene.
Challenge your audience.
That's the job, no way to give it up or pass it on.
People don't really get upset on the internet whenever I post on my music page about political ideals, but I can't do things like, you know, make fun of the fact that Guile has the same tattoo on both arms.
You don't have to be aggressive about it.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this here podcast. You know, it's something that I do really enjoy doing each and every week. Being able to get the time to sit in my car and just talk about stuff that I don't talk about with other people because I don't have a lot of people in my life that I can talk about this stuff with. So I do enjoy putting this together and just being able to talk about stuff. And again, I want to thank you all for listening. Frankly, though, I would like to know what you think about the show. You can email your questions and comments to me at stevenorelse@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment to the episode on the site. That's over at stevenorelse.com. I would also feel very loved if you would take a moment and go to iTunes and leave me a review. Even if you don't listen to the show through iTunes, just, you know, you can go on and leave rate the episode, throw a couple sentences down. The more reviews and ratings I get, the easier it is for other people to find the show. So, you know, if you could do that, that'd be great. If you don't want to, that's fine. You know, I'm not gonna guilt anybody into doing anything that, you know, I don't go out and review every single freaking podcast I listen to. So, but I'm just throwing it out there. If you do, however, feel inclined to throw a little support my way, there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can do like Kevin and become my patron over at Patreon, and for as little as $1 a month, not only are you going to get that warm and fuzzy feeling that you're helping me provide for my family, you also will get instant access to my other podcast called My Other Podcast, which releases twice a week and is exclusive to patrons only. You can check out my Patreon over at patreon.com/Steeven Orr. And if you're not into a monthly commitment type of thing when it comes to supporting folks with a little bit of money, you can throw me a one-time payment for as little as $3 over at ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com/Steeven R. Orr. Links will be in the show notes. The theme song for this episode is Expendable by Trinity X. Find it and more songs from the band at atomiczombierecords.bandcamp.com. The rest of the music in this episode comes from kHill. You can find him online at michaelkhill.bandcamp.com. That's mikalkhill.bandcamp.com. And don't worry, those links will also be in the show notes. So thanks for sticking around, folks. This was the Steeven Orr's podcast, and I'm suddenly in the mood for some bacon. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye, Daddy.
Bye-bye, Daddy.
Good job.